Well, good morning. Welcome to Northern Maine Productions. It's Monday, September 1st, 2025. Happy Labor Day. We're back on this Wisconsin BKN. I did a video a couple days ago where I resurrected this and got it going. Had pretty easy time getting this engine started and running. So after I finished that video the other day, my intention was to let this thing run, get it fully warmed up, and change the oil in it. Well, I had a little problem. I left it going. I started it up here and left it about half throttle, and I walked away and I left it running here for about an hour or so, hour and 20 minutes, and I come back in and it was dripping fuel out of the jet on the bottom of the carburetor, and obviously the jet had backed out a little bit because it was starting to run a little rich. So I reached down in there to turn the jet back in. Well, I noticed it was turning really loose. I mean, it barely had any resistance to it. So the idea was I grabbed a 5/16 wrench and I went to snug that packing nut up. And that's when I really screwed up. It was still it was running at that time, and I didn't put a backing wrench on this nut that holds the float bowl on, and when I went to tighten this up, it was already fairly tight, and I stripped the bottom of the carburetor out. And while that was sitting there running, and the nut and the bowl dropped right loose, and it just started pouring. It's a wonder I never burnt this thing. It started pouring gas down over that magneto while that thing was running, and luckily the gas all leaked out of the bowl and it quit. And luckily I didn't have to actually hit the stop button to stop it. So here we are in another dilemma with this, because, you know, this thing's pretty old. It's a 1955. This has got a Marble Shebler carburetor on it. It's a VH53. They're a fairly common carburetor. They were widely used on Wisconsin engines. So obviously I don't have any parts for this, and I don't know anybody that has any Wisconsin parts in this area, so I watched a couple of videos on YouTube of people attempting to fix stuff like this with JB Weld, with JB Metal Weld. So I cleaned this all off and dried all this mess off, and what I did, this nut is quite deep. It goes down in there quite a ways, but there's a groove cut on this nut that's got the pilot holes in it for the jet, for the gas to go through. Well, obviously you can't plug them up full of that JB Weld, and you also can't plug these holes here. So I watched some videos with guys, and they were actually putting like a coat of wax or a coat of oil on their threaded bolt or nut or whatever, their bolt part. And then they were putting the JB Weld directly onto the bolt and driving it into the hole and just leaving it. And by having the oil or the wax on the threads of the nut that screws down in here, it would allow the JB Weld not to stick to it. So that's what I did. Obviously it was the lower part of this carburetor that was stripped. It was corroded fairly bad when I took it apart. I'm not gonna lie. You know, it was probably pretty well compromised anyways, but it did tighten up when I put it back together, and it really friggin' ticked me off when I stripped it. But it was the threads that are up in here on the top of this brass nut. There's only like 2 or 3 threads there that, you know, they just grab in a very small spot, so it didn't take much to strip it out. So last night I mixed up some of that JB weld, that metal weld stuff, and I threaded this most of the way down in there until just the bottom threads of this brass nut were exposed here, and I thoroughly coated it with that JB weld, and then I pushed it down in the, I threaded it the rest of the way down in there, and I left it. So I'm going to wait about 48 hours or so, and then I'm going to try to back this nut out of here and see if that created some new threads in there. You know, I'm not looking to keep this thing in service for a long time. I mean, I'd just like to have it so I can start it up and run it once in a while. I may mount it. Like I said, I wanted to actually kind of build a small battery charger, a portable battery charger that I could, you know, wheel around on a cart. So, you know, I'm just doing this, just playing around. I don't actually need this engine, so it's not a big deal if it doesn't ever run again, but this is kind of going to be the temporary repair, and hopefully at some point in time I can find a different carburetor body, because I do have, you know, there's many differences. They made many different VH style carburetors, but the problem lies with the jetting, and even the throttle plates are different between models. This one, they actually have the throttle plates are not centered up in these. The throttle shaft, it's not centered really either. This one has a 12-degree throttle plate in it. It's actually offset 12 degrees, which I guess was help for the throttle response or something. But now the VH53 carburetor is an updated version of this. They made this carburetor for a long time, but the VH53 actually has replaceable bushings in the carburetor body for the throttle shaft, and it actually had some sort of dust shields in there too to keep all your abrasive stuff out of the throttle shaft area, keep it from wearing out. Now, from what I read on some documents, this VH53 replaced the older style VH14. So there's always a possibility I could find a VH14, you know, that if it was still in reasonable condition, could probably make that work on here too. But I'd just soon have the right carburetor for it. You know, I'd like the throttle to work right. This thing's kind of odd and obscure. The throttle linkage is on the bottom side of the carburetor body. Goes over across under here and hooks up to this governor shaft. So I'm just in waiting period here right now. I'll probably do a quick little video here when I get ready to take this nut out, and we'll see what the result was. I'm not expecting anything good from it, I can tell you. I'm pretty skeptical of these quick repairs. Ideally, if I could find some sort of a barrel type of thread insert that you could actually, where I could actually drill this neck out a little bit and put a shallow threaded insert in there, and then actually get it Loctited back in there and re-drill these fuel holes here in the bottom of it. There's a possibility that could be, you know, you could fix it that way. But you know, what I'd like to have is something that or I could drill this body out and have an insert that you could actually hammer down in there and press it into place. You know, maybe put some red Loctite or something on it. But who knows if that'll happen or not. The sad part is I was able to actually, the main jet came right out of it too. I took that the main mixture jet right out of the body there yesterday, screwed right out. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to take them out of Briggs & Stratton carburetors before, but sometimes they can be a bear on the Briggs & Stratton. But I can tell you one thing, this is definitely not a Briggs & Stratton engine. This engine is a lot more robust. And it's designed quite a lot different than a Briggs engine too. This thing was definitely made for the long run. This engine run, geez, the other day when this was running here, it run excellent. It never smoked, it never quit, never misfired. I mean, other than the only thing that it did was when that jet started backing out of that carburetor a little bit, and then it started coughing, spitting, and sputtering a little bit. But it's really too bad that I ruined that carburetor, because that carburetor was working perfect. I mean, you saw it in the other video. You idle the thing down, it sat right there and idled perfect. It's actually getting lots of fuel on the idle circuit. I actually did eventually end up turning this idle mixture jet in to lean it out just a little bit. It was actually getting a little too much fuel at idle, but oh well, I guess we'll wait and see what happens here. Stay tuned. Alright, good afternoon now. Welcome back sometime later. As you can see, my carburetor temporary fix was successful. That did work. I very lightly torqued that nut onto that bowl and it tightened up. So I've got another plan just to back that up, and I'll share that with you guys at a later time. So I was able to start this up and run it and warm it up and get the oil drained out of it, because it has not had the oil changed in it for, I don't even know if I changed it the last time I worked on it, to be honest with you. I didn't know that much about these engines at that time, and I now know that there's a pickup screen in the bottom of this oil pan right down here that has to be cleaned. Now I set this up here and put some oil in the pan just so I can demonstrate to you guys how this oil pump works. If you look inside the engine here, as you can see, this is much different than a Briggs & Stratton engine. This has got roller bearings in it. It's got I was a little surprised to see that there wasn't actually an oil hole in this dipper that goes to the rod journal. They're down here on the side instead, on both sides, and there's not one on this side of the rod either. So evidently this is a little different than the one that I was watching. I was watching Terrell Fixes All work on one of these engines, but I think his is a different model. I'm pretty sure that his was a AKN instead of a BKN. So this rod right here runs off the camshaft, and it works up and down as the engine's running. Well, that's what makes the oil pump function. It is imperative that this oil pump work in this thing or it will blow up. So all you have to do is push this down, and as you can see, that will fill that trough, if that's working correctly. And that will fill up until it overflows. or the pan runs out of oil and the thing starts sucking air, which is what just happened. So it is imperative that that oil pump work. Now, I did not take the pump apart. I could tell it was working when I took it apart, when I pulled the pan off in it. I mean, everything was well oiled. So that is a very important step to remember. And when you put this back on the engine, it is imperative that you get the oil pan on there correctly also. Obviously, you don't want to put it on there backwards and have your connecting rod over in here. I don't know if it'll even go on backwards. It probably won't, but I haven't tried. So basically, I guess I'm ready to put this oil pan back on the engine. Now, I could probably get some new gaskets for it, but I don't think there's any reason to. Nothing happened when this thing came right perfectly off there when I took the pan off of there, and I'm sure it's probably not going to leak. I don't think this is a real high hours engine, because the one that I watched Terrell work on was loaded right full of sludge in the bottom of that. This one had a little tiny bit in it, but it wasn't much. The oil pickup screen was nowhere near plugged in this engine, so I didn't see any metal fragments or big chunks of metal or anything, so I'm thinking that this engine is still in good condition. It sounds good when it's running. There's no knocking noise, there's no ticking noise, there's nothing abnormal about the way it runs. When you get it warmed up and you rev it way up, it doesn't rattle or anything like that. So I think I said before, I've come up with a good solution for this carburetor. It's probably, I wouldn't mess around with it if I didn't know if this carburetor works, but this carburetor works very well. This carburetor runs well, so, and the throttle shaft ain't all wore out in it, so that's important. But what I'm having an idea with is there's a pretty thick boss on the top of this carburetor, so I'm thinking about getting some metal rods similar to this and putting one across here and drilling a hole big enough so that tacking nut will protrude out through it, but yet it'll land on this big nut on this jet. And I'm gonna put a couple of 1/4-inch bolts through, and then I'll put another bar. There's enough room on the top of this carburetor that I can put another bar across the top of that and actually clamp the whole assembly together. I'm pretty sure that will probably work about as good as anything. I mean, next to paying $100 for a used carburetor, I've been searching on eBay all day today, and I don't really want to spend $100 on an old carburetor that might not be any better than this one. You can buy a brand new one. I looked on one of the distributors for Wisconsin engines. They still have Zenith carburetors on there to replace this old carburetor here, but holy smokes, they're like $350, something like that. They're a ridiculous amount of money, and I'm not putting that much money into this engine. I mean, it's a good engine and it's usable, but I'm not that pressed to have this engine run like brand new. So I'm going to try that fix on this at some point here, and I'm fairly confident that that's going to work. We did a fix like that, similar to that years ago on a 300 Ford 6 cylinders, on the EGR valves. The friggin' ears used to break off them things or something. I can't remember, but it would have been like on an 88 or an 89 300 Ford, and from what I remember, there was something on there that would blow apart, and they'd have a big, huge exhaust leak. And from what I remember, Used to just buy some small seat clamps, some little cast iron seat clamps, and screw them on there and tighten them right up. And from what I remember, that worked very well on those. So there's no reason why I couldn't put a couple of bars on here and a couple of 1/4-inch bolts, double knot them so they don't have a tendency to back off. But this jet stands proud enough off of this bowl that I'm pretty sure that will clamp that down sufficiently to hold that there. I mean, the gaskets are all whole in it, they're all still there, so, you know, this newer gas that we're running nowadays doesn't seem to gum the carburetors up anywhere near as bad as the old stuff did. And I mean, worst case scenario, I might have to take this apart. I've got one of my lawnmowers here. That snapper lawnmower right over there, it's got an old style Briggs on it, and I have been running that. I've had that machine around here for almost 10 years, and I've only had the bowl off in it one time in 10 years, and that was because I got a crap load of water in it. I accidentally dumped some watered down gas in it. So this new gas, as bad as everybody hates it and as much corrosion as it causes, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like that it's as bad. Typically when I run this, when I stop this, if I'm going to leave them setting for a long time, I'll usually run the carburetor dry of gas anyway, so that helps a lot. So well, anyways, I don't think there's any need of having you guys watch me put this oil pan back on this thing. I don't want to bore you to death with that, but when I get ready to do this fix on this carburetor, I will definitely do some more video on that. But for now, it does work, so but I'll be doing that right off. And I got to try to get an air cleaner for this thing of some sort. I don't know what I'll get. I may just try to find I'll try to find something to put on here. Maybe like a little ATV air filter or something that I can just slide over the neck of this carburetor and clamp on there. I don't have the original air filter, and I did find one for sale on eBay. If they wanted 35 bucks for it plus shipping, and I don't know. I'd like to do it, but I just can't really afford to do all these extracurricular things right at this time. So, well, I think I'm going to let you go for now. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you got some information out of it. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Well, good afternoon. It's the next day. As you can see, we got the oil pan back on this engine and got it filled back up full of oil, and I've done the repair to the carburetor that I talked about. So let's go over that just a little bit here. Let me tilt this back so you guys can see obviously what I had done here. I drilled I believe it was a 3/8 hole through this metal bar, just enough so that it would go up over the packing nut that's in the bottom of that bowl, and then you can see that it rests very firmly on that brass nut. And I drilled a couple of 1/4-inch holes. I lined that all up, and I was able to obtain some 4-inch 1/4-inch bolts and I actually used a nut for a spacer right here on this boss right here where the fuel line goes in. Now, you know, obviously you don't have to tighten that thing super tight. I kind of eyeballed it, and I watched this bar right here, and I basically just tightened that down enough to get a preload on it so I could see that that bar was actually starting to bow just a little bit. Now, you don't want to crank them right down obviously and bend that bar or worse, crushed the carburetor body. That's seated pretty firmly on that boss right there on the top of that carburetor, so it doesn't interfere with the throttle linkage, it doesn't interfere with the choke linkage, and it won't interfere with the air cleaner when I get an air cleaner on it either. So next to paying $100 for a used carburetor, that's about the only option that there was left. I don't particularly care for that repair. I would never do it to a customer's engine if I was working on a customer engine, but I'll do it to my own. I actually got to utilize this little drill press. I almost forgot I had that. That was down in my basement in my house. It's been down there about 6 or 7 years, and I brought it out here last night and set it up, and it works quite good. This is a multi-speed. I don't know what in the world you'd ever put it in high gear for, because it really don't have much power. But it worked good for what I used it for here. So I guess the only thing I got left to do is I'm going to screw that engine back down to this workbench, and I'm going to put some gas in it, and we're going to see what happens here. I'm sure it's going to run. I'm positive it'll run, because I ran it yesterday without this on here. But this is just kind of a backup, just to make sure that don't pull out of there again. You know, who knows if that JB weld would hold that or not. It might have, but I'm not super confident in that stuff. So I guess I'm going to put some gas in it, and we're going to see what's going to happen here. It's either going to run or it's not going to run. This will be the first time that I've actually started this since I had the oil pan off in it. So I kind of like to start it up and let it run for an extended amount of time here and get it good and warmed up and make sure it's going to run good. So I'll be back, I guess. So bear with me here. So we are back. It's sometime later. The carburetor worked phenomenal. It works very well. I started this and I let it run for it ran for about an hour and 40 minutes. And it was doing really good, and then it just kind of started, I kept hearing this little spit and sputter, spit. She'd start, it was misfiring. I could tell that something was happening. And the longer it ran, the worse it got. And then I reached down and tried to accelerate, which when you accelerate an engine, it puts more stress on the ignition system when it's under power. And it just backfired. It started shooting flames out the carburetor here and spitting back at me, and then it fell right flat on its face and quit. And it wouldn't restart. It would kick once in a while and spit and kick back, and so I said, well, guess we better dig into this magneto. Well, I took it apart, and every single piece inside of this thing is a Fairbanks Morse part. So nothing's been changed. It hasn't even it's still got a Fairbanks Morse branded condenser in it. I don't think the condenser was bad. The points don't look very bad. The points have just a little tiny bit of pitting on them. However, I don't believe that this jacket around this coil is supposed to be squishy like that. That thing is all, and it's fairly cooled off now. It was even worse when it was hot. It was just like handling silly putty. So evidently this stuff is all broken down. This rubber friggin', who the heck would know what kind of. But the good news is this is a Fairbanks Morse FM. It's an XD1B7 magneto. It takes the exact same coil as a farm tractor. They're widely available, and they're the ignition coil. I found one online for sale. It's like $54 or something. And you can buy the points and condensers too. So I'm going to end this video right here. And then I'm going to order some parts to fix this magneto, and I'll bring a video on that when I do that, because it's probably going to be several days before I can get a coil for it. But this repair here is golden. That works good. There's no leaks coming out of that carburetor now. The gas is still actually turned on. It's been sitting here for over an hour since it quit. And it's fine. It's fine. That works really good. It don't look very pretty, but it's very functional. So I guess I'm gonna cut it off here. Sometimes you have got to put your thinking cap on though when it comes to repairing old stuff like this. Sometimes you gotta put your best foot forward and see if you can come up with something to make an old part work. This thing ran very well up until that misfire started. This thing was running like a clock. Motor sounds good, doesn't smoke. So here we are. I'm gonna have to, I'm also gonna get a new muffler for it. I guess, you know, I decided today I might as well put a little bit of money into this. I'm gonna keep it around here and keep it undercover. I might as well fix a stupid thing. I might even spring for a new cover for this. This cover's kind of cracked up a little. Anyways, so probably next time we'll probably put a new cover on there and a new coil, and maybe even some points and condenser. I haven't decided that yet. But anyways, you guys all have a good evening. I've had enough of this thing for today. Bye bye.